and take a deep breath in and just be present. This is our last meeting. This was a long journey, a lot of work. All of you have given your heart and soul to this, and the city, the committee members, the public, thank you. So let's just take a minute. Okay, we're here. I want to welcome all of you. We have
Recording
a lot.
Stopped.
We have a
Recording
lot
in
to
progress.
do tonight, and we will get through all of it, I promise, by 9 o'clock, including time for public comment. So if we might bring up the slides, please. Thank you. So what we will do is now progress to the next slide, and we will walk through the details for how you operate in Zoom. I know you've seen this, but there are times when we have perhaps a new person that's joining in the audience, and they need to know how to do this because participation is critical here. So Aaron, I'll let you take it away, please.
Thank you, Tracy. First off, I'd like to introduce Mariana, who is our interpreter for the day, and she'll be interpreting in Spanish how to access our Spanish interpretation.
Hola, buenas noches a todos. A los que necesiten escuchar esta reunión en español, tienen la opción de hacerlo como muestra el icono ahí del globo para elegir el idioma de preferencia si quieren en español. Muchas gracias. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Mariana. Next slide, please. For those joining us in the audience, to connect to audio, it'll be on the left-hand corner on the Join Audio button. And you have two options, either to use the device's audio or call in using a cell phone. Next slide, please. For members of our ad hoc, to unmute yourself, you click the mute button. For participation, please make sure to mute yourself unless speaking up. Same goes for members of our audience under general public public comment. When invited to unmute yourself, if you can speak up as well. Next slide, please. For members of our ad hoc, just a reminder to always have the video on, and it's designated by a little camera sign. Lastly, for our ad hoc, to raise hand, you would go to the participants button and click the raise hand feature. You can also do this as a member of the audience if you want to have general public comment at the end of our meeting. Next slide, please. And if you have any difficulties or technical difficulties throughout this meeting, you can either email myself or if it's in Spanish, you can email Martin Rigula. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you, Mariana. What we will do now, I want to quickly walk through the agenda. We've done our welcome. I'll do a quick review. We're then going to proceed with Susie's help with a roll call, the acceptance of the minutes, and then for today's topic, which is diversity in city hiring or increased diversity in city hiring, we will go through the presentation of the ideas that were submitted in the homework, as well as each committee member will be able to have a couple of minutes to share their ideas. We will then vote on the ideas. We'll come up with our SMART goals for the top 3 ideas. We'll have a closing discussion, which is a review and discussion of all of the recommendations that we have put forth, which we've compiled here at the end of the slide deck, as well as the 3 from today. We'll review the process going forward, and then of course we'll invite the public to comment. So if we might go forward to the next slide, please. So just to remind everyone, this is to be a safe place for expression, for self-expression, if you will, inclusivity and equity. Those are two very important things. I'd like everybody to have a chance to speak who would like to. Easy participation and equal access, raise your hand, get my attention, get Aaron's attention, meaningful engagement. This is our last session. This is your chance to make comments, but please keep them on topic, but that come from your heart, because this work has to come from your heart as well as your head. And then accountability. We're accountable to each other in terms of how we interact with each other, and to the city, and to all of those who are participating and watching this. We are actually setting an example. Let's go to the next slide, please. Susie, if I might have your help, please, for the roll call so we can see who's here and establish a quorum.
Great, thank you, Tracy. Good evening, everyone. I'll start alphabetically again. Joel Brunner DeKeen.
Present.
Claudia De La Pena. Ramona Faith.
Present.
Rabbi Ted Feldman. Anthony Franklin.
Present.
Joanna Garcia. Zaira Garcia.
Present.
Hanan Hunaidi. Eric Leland.
Present.
Sandra Lowry.
Present.
Sadie Martinez. Julia Main.
Present.
Mike Miller.
Present.
Joanna Pond.
Present.
Kenyana Reynolds.
Present.
Fabian Romo Macias. Faith Ross.
Present.
Mark Scott. Joe Sturdivant. Risa Tinsley Green.
Present.
Pedro Toledo. Catherine Welds.
Present.
Aaron Wilkins.
Present.
Luz Wire.
Present.
Thank you. And we have a quorum.
Thank you, Susie. I appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who's here. So what we will do now is ask you just to take a few minutes, if you haven't already had the chance, and review the minutes from the last meeting, which was way back in August. These are action minutes. They're summary minutes. Let me know if there are any corrections. And then if not, we'll deem the minutes approved. So let's just take a minute or two here, please. Are there any corrections? Aaron or Ingrid, you see, I don't hear or see, do you see any hands?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. So then we will deem the minutes from 8/17 approved. Thank you. And let's go to the next slide, please. So just a reminder, because we're going to now talk about our goals for the topic of tonight, which is increasing the diversity in city hiring. Specific, we want to be as specific as possible. Nebulous goals never get us anywhere. We want them to be measurable. We want them to be actionable, something that you can actually do, relevant to the topic, and then of course time bound, because then you can more easily measure things. So let's go to the next slide, please. What we will do here is we're going to give each person each committee member 2 minutes to discuss your views on what should be done to increase diversity in city hiring. And remember, those are the SMART goals. So let's go to the next slide for a second before we start going through the role. What I'd like to do is review what was presented in the homework. These were the ideas that people sent in. Now, of course, as I've mentioned on a number of occasions, committee members have taken a lot of time, and I thank you. And the entire committee thanks everyone who's done this work to put great detail and thought and suggestions into their homework. Of course, we can't condense all of that for discussion. So I try to pick the areas that don't overlap and make the idea as succinct as possible. I do want you to know that when we send the report in the packet to the council, we will include all of your homework, because we want them to read through all of your ideas and suggestions and plans. So this is merely a summary for discussion purposes. So one of the, I'll read through these. One of them was to review this particular site, ideal.com diversity-hiring or similar for hiring ideas. Retain a consultant focused on DEI recruiting and hiring, and remember diversity, equity, and inclusion. Retain diverse staffing companies that put forth diverse candidates. So I know a number of my clients in the DEI space are doing just that. They're holding their staffing companies to specific DEI metrics. And the city has some rules that don't always allow them to do that because it's a public entity, but there are ways to ensure that we have more diverse candidates by going to sources where there is more diversity present. Remove language barriers. That's been a big issue, particularly Spanish. Equal access ordinance modeled after the San Francisco and Oakland. Establish Office of Equity led by a director of equity and inclusion. A recruitment process that values merit and offers a fair assessment of all candidates. Annual anti-racism and bias training for city departments. Data report on diversity in all committees, commissions, and board. Hire equity first consultants, which I believe is based in Sonoma County, to help navigate DEI. List all job openings with at least 50 LGBTQ++ and people of color groups, as well as with colleges. Most colleges have affinity groups that reflect both of these designations. Reach out to colleges and high schools to create a pipeline of diverse candidates, which is similar to 11, but a slightly bit different. And mentoring for high school seniors from underrepresented groups so that they have an opportunity to see the type of positions that are available within the city and that they are guided toward proper preparation. And finally, provide housing assistance to help defray the high costs in Petaluma. So what I would like to do now is go through the role and have each person who is present you have 2 minutes to share your thoughts on increasing diversity in city hiring. So if I might have the city's help with this, please. And the city will be capturing this. So if anything has been added, we'll make sure to put an additional box or so, but this might be pretty comprehensive. We'll see.
So Tracy, just to check in, will you help me decide when to add something to the slide?
Yes. Absolutely. Okay. We're trying to keep it, fairly within these guidelines, but if something comes up that's completely different, I'll say something, Ingrid.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm sure the person presenting will also say something and I'll chime in. Thank you.
And then real quick, logistically for Ingrid, I'm going to take over the screen and add a timer.
Great. So I'll be calling roll alphabetically again, and I will include those who perhaps have logged in after our original roll call, just for fairness and to include everyone. All right, Ingrid, Aaron, you ready?
Yes.
Excellent, great. We'll start with Joel Bruner Dekeen.
Thank you guys so much, and thanks for everybody's work on everything. Looking through everything, I agree with a lot of those that were put up there. I think the most important thing is to begin with a data report on diversity in all committees, committees, commissions, and boards, to see where we're actually starting our focus on making sure we have people of many diverse ethnic backgrounds. And I think we should retain consultants focused on DEI recruiting and hiring. And then I also strongly agree with reaching out to high school and colleges to create kind of a pipeline to some higher opportunities within city government, within city committees and things like that. And the main one that I also saw was housing assistance. I think that's very direly needed here in Petaluma, especially with the cost of housing and rental markets and things like that. So those are my my importance there.
Great, thank you so much. Next is Claudia de la Peña. Next is Ramona Faith.
Yes, thank you so much. Mine is fairly quick. I do like the recommendations and the categories that are on the screen. But I think, for me, the first step would be to evaluate the current practices and policies. So what are the current practices and policies? And then I would research best practices. And I would reach out and have a consultant or an outside agency come in and take a look at reviewing the current and developing the new, because it's hard when you're in the trenches and seeing opportunities if sometimes fresh eyes are really good. So evaluating current processes and developing new processes based on best practices. There's a lot of ways to identify best practices. I mean, you can look at organizations that have a diverse work group. The consultant should be able to refer you to some organizations that have good hiring practices in place. I do think that identifying the pipeline, which would be the colleges and the schools, is a good idea. I also think part of reviewing your current practices would be also looking at your job postings and where you reach out to as far as job postings. Because sometimes we want something different, but we do the same thing over and over again. So I think the whole hiring process and practices and policies need to be reviewed just to see where the opportunities exist. And that's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Rabbi Ted Feldman. Anthony Franklin.
Good evening. So like many other people said, there are lots of good ideas up there. All of them are good ideas. If we're just going to focus on the ones that we talked about or were important to us, I guess to help people understand or believe that it is an issue, you would start with the data. So look at number 9. How can we get some data? How can we say what we're doing and what the data is actually showing for diversity on committees, commissions, and boards? There are lots of ways you can do that. I like number 1. As far as there are resources out there, you can look and see how other people are already doing it. That's just one idea that's there, or you can go to similar other sites for different other ideas. The second one, retaining a consultant. Again, not trying to reinvent the wheel. Get people that are specialized in this area that have had success in other cities similar to ours, and bring them in so that way we can hit the ground running. When you look at it, can it be measurable? We can make recommendations about defining what parameters or goals for what diversity might look like, establish a baseline for various demographics prior to implementation, and then once those plans are implemented, can you take a look and see, is there a net increase in the number of diverse employees citywide? Is it actionable? The city helped recommend the city council develop hiring goals. The ad hoc committee can make recommendations about the hiring goals. Recommendations. City council incentivize diverse hiring. City council incentivize staffing companies to provide qualified underrepresented employees. Take a look at what our job descriptions look like. Are they written so that they're going to appeal to a diverse group, or are they written that they're not going to do that? Again, the city council can reach out to hiring companies that have access to diverse candidates and that have a track record of being able to hire from a diverse group. Is it relevant? Well, given the topic that we're talking about, diverse hiring with qualified candidates from underrepresented groups will help them feel included in our community. The community will see underrepresented groups in a positive light and positions of responsibility, and that should work towards bringing us closer together. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanna Garcia. Zaira Garcia.
Hey everyone. So I agree with most of these recommendations, but I'm just going to bring some truth to the reasons why we don't have representation in Petaluma. That definitely has to do with housing, pay, and data. But the truth of the matter is that women of color continue to have worse experience in the workplace. Women of color face a wider range of microaggressions. The allyship gap persists. White employees don't fully understand what allyship looks like. And in order to have this progress, we need to have the city to advance diversity and inclusion, can begin to address burnout, can do acknowledgements. Again, we're talking about pipelines. We need to really look at those, but we just need to be honest with these conversations, which is why I think we need to hire either consultants within Sonoma County, such as Equity First, and also maybe partner up with other consultants that are BIPOC led. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Hanan Hunaidi.
Susie, this is Tracy. Hanan just sent me an email. She's having a family emergency and apologizes. If she can chime in later, she will, but right now she has to tend to her family.
Fabulous. Okay, thank you. Eric Leland.
Good evening. Thank you. And I agree with, I think everyone said these recommendations are really good, and I concur with that. I would also agree that starting with, well, we should begin with number 9, data report on diversity. However, I'd rather see that led by, to start with, by an independent expert that we hire in, so a consultant, so that we can really get some space between the sort of the structural reality that we live in and the situation in the city, and get an independent voice on this and look at this. I also think I'd like to see some permanence around a focus on equity and inclusion with the city. So, hiring a consultant can be a step to gathering the data and making some recommendations. But I also think implementing a long-standing sort of institutional approach, if you will, so establishing an office of equity could come out of working with a consultant. Perhaps they wouldn't recommend that, but I'd like to see some effort to look at a long-standing focus on these issues, which are structural. So we should bend our structures sort of more long-term to address those issues. I think other recommendations, such as providing housing and removing language barriers, are important, and I would expect that those kinds of issues and others on this page could be addressed as well by the consultant that we would call in and kind of work out the different recommendations and the priorities and how to proceed with those. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sonja Lowry.
Thank you. I will try to not replicate or share anything that was said, but I must share that I fully support everything that Zaire said earlier. Just want to give a bunch of snaps and thank yous to, and just echo her sentiments. I'll just add 3 things. One would be just trying to include a diverse set of people in the hiring process. So when we stick to heterogeneous hiring teams, right, it just counteracts what we're trying to do. So trying to include multiple people from different backgrounds at each step of the screening and interview process to independently assess candidates is a good strategy. Another one is to, after you really hone in on looking at that data, trying to create some specific diversity targets, right? Trying to really understand and tracking metrics at each stage of the hiring process, I think is important. And there's some that are already out there. Thomson Reuters has a D&I index that can be used. And then the last one I would say is intentionally selecting for diversity. A lot of organizations shy away from this one, but if we're really trying to give and promote underrepresented humans, right, an opportunity in the hiring process, you know, examples of inclusive hiring goals or targets that are found to be consistent with the law. They're out there and we're able to use them, but we have to be intentional about it.
All right, Sadie Martinez. Julia Main.
Good evening. I agree with a lot that has been already said, but I do think that there's something about examining the culture in which you start to evaluate, is this a welcoming place? Is there room to actually have the diverse people that you are wanting to have and to make sure that they will stay? And I do agree with a lot of what people said, that there's so much that's not understood about what it's like when you are the only or one of few in an environment. So I love the idea of having a more diverse team to be on the interview process as well. I do think it's really important to have the idea of high school students and college students having the idea of different types of jobs that are available for young people. A lot of times they don't even know that they exist. So really being intentional about providing, you know, internships, even come to work for 2 or 3 days where it's a paid stipend that a young person could have to see if this could be a career path, I think would be important. And yeah, there's a lot, but I really think looking at the data and also the environment and the culture and of the environment, like why has it been so long that you haven't had these diverse things? I also agree with having some kind of stipend for the payment for the individual, because it is so costly to live there. So that's all I have, and there's more in my homework. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Mike Miller.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having us again. And I'll just say a quick congratulations to everyone for making it through this very long series of meetings. You all deserve a round of applause for making it this far. Not to be repetitive or contrarian, but I think the ones that really stuck out to me, excuse me, is the bottom row, especially 12, 13, and 14. I think reaching out to the youth, reaching out to kids is something that I think could really go a long way towards creating more diversity. And I think it challenges us to think of diversity beyond just traditionally protected groups, but realizing that we need better age diversity in our representative government. And so I think reaching out to kids, reaching out to schools, letting them know that this is an opportunity, that this is a path for them, internships, paid internships, I think are a really great way to grab them young and let them know that this is an opportunity to serve, an opportunity to get involved, an opportunity to create some experience, the incentive being to develop a resume, to get that merit, to show that they can do the job regardless of where they end up wanting to do or what they want to do for the rest of their careers. So I really think just sort of reaching out to the youth, reaching out to kids, reaching out to high schools, reaching out to colleges and really making that part of our diversity and inclusion beyond just protected groups, I think would be a really great way to, as Julie said, create an environment where people feel accepted and want to come be involved with what Petaluma has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanna Pond.
Hi. So sorry, one of my kids was talking to me just now. I think I love what a lot of people had to say. I want to echo Eric, especially. The Office of Equity definitely should have some permanence. I'd love to see that be a priority in our city. And also some other folks mentioned having inclusive hiring committees. I mean, there's been studies out there saying that you get more diverse candidates and you get people not just to initially apply, but then also come back for that interview when the hiring committees are more diverse. I'd love to see that happen as well. Also, really digging deep and looking at the structural inequities in the city of Petaluma and how the city is run, and maybe looking at why that may be keeping people from wanting to apply for jobs, or also once you get these employees, like retention, like what are the stats on the number of BIPOC, LGBTQ plus folks that we've had employed by our city, and what are the retention rates? And in my current job, I've been a part of 2 hiring committees in the last 6 months. And before we even start, we review different biases in the interview process so that we're aware of those going into the process, and just so that we can acknowledge those biases when they come up. So thank you.
Joanna, it's Tracy. Hi there.
Hi.
How are you? Hi.
Good.
Good. Before you go away, I'd like to get a little more clarification, because I've heard one that we may need to add. And when you mentioned looking at structural inequities in the city, can you flesh that out just a little bit more? Because we may need to add that, unless you think it's already included in one of the others.
I don't know if it's included. Maybe someone else can answer that. Too much for me to glance at quickly, but I think just looking at just like any other system, like what are the different inequities in within the city of Petaluma? I mean, I love the fact that we are mostly Petaluma folks, and I think when we think about hiring for the city, we're looking at hiring people from Petaluma, but also that could create an issue as well. Like if we also want to attract more people, I mean, our town's only 1% Black, looking outside of that. And are we like favorably biasing, like, oh, well, this person's from Petaluma, like, let's put them at the top of the list of hires, or maybe there is someone who could bring more to our town. Are not necessarily from here, or I'm sure that there's tons of other things I'm not thinking of off the top of my head, but just different.
No, that's helpful. Okay, so Ingrid, let's add. There's 2 so far that I heard that I would like to add. So are you ready?
Give me 1 second here.
Okay. Bear with us, everyone. This is a real-time process. So we make sure we get all these ideas up.
Okay, 15, ready.
More diverse, the wording we can, futz with later, but more diverse team on the or a more diverse hiring panel. How's that? More diverse hiring panels. Or, yeah, okay.
Was there another one?
Yep. The next one is our look at the structural inequities in the city of Petaluma. I think a good consultant would do that, but I think we need to call that out. Now, it's not updating real time. Should it be?
Oh, let me see. You might. let me, I'm not sharing my screen right now. Aaron's is sharing his screen.
Okay, so we want to be able to see yours so that when people, we continue to go through the role. Yeah.
Aaron, are you there? Okay.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. Perfect.
Is this good so far?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so let's keep going, and sorry for the interruption, and thank you, Joanna, for more clarification.
Wonderful. Next, we have Kenyana Reynolds.
Thank you. In the interest of time and not repeating things, I just like to say and echo Joel, Zaira, Anthony, Eric, Sandra, Mike, and Joanna, and I yield the rest of my time.
All right. Fabian Romo Macias. Faith Ross.
Good evening. I want to go back to something Ramona Faith said, and that is we really need to look at where we are as a city and our hiring practices now before we start to try and fix something. And so if your ads don't reach areas that have diverse populations and the ad pictures don't reflect a diverse population, then your applicant pool is going to be limited. So we need to really look at what we're doing right now. And I think that's covered probably in number 9 there, and having the data to be able to look at where we are now. And then once you have a diverse workforce, or if you're hiring people, what we need to do is make sure that the city takes steps to ensure that new employees have an equal opportunity to thrive and stay within the city. Biases within an area or department can make life for a new employee hard, and their chances to succeed are diminished by a hostile workplace, regardless of their qualifications. I've seen that happen. The other thing is that I really like the ideas in 12 and 13 about working, especially working with students within the community so they know what our city has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Faith. Let's add one more retention strategy. Ingrid, you ready?
Yes.
Retention strategies for diverse employees, please.
All right, Aaron, you can sync up. There it is. Yay.
There it is. Thank you. Technology is a wonderful thing. Okay, Susie and Ingrid.
Wonderful when it works.
And Ingrid and Aaron, you all are just wonderful. So, all right, Susie.
Great. Continuing on, Mark Scott. Joe Sturdivant. Risa Tinsley Green.
Yeah, hi. I think for the sake of time, I don't really have anything else to add that hasn't already been said. I want to just especially echo what Zaira and Sandra said. Those points pretty much summed up everything that I was going to say. So I think I'm just going to keep it moving and hear what other people have to say.
Thank you. Pedro Toledo.
Thank you. So I just wanted to, I think one of the things that the pandemic has really demonstrated is that certain populations have faced inequalities that even within marginalized communities, some communities face even larger barriers and larger inequalities. And I just wanted to highlight those of language minorities, especially those who don't speak English. And I think one of the things that some communities have done, including the city of San Francisco and Oakland, has been to implement equal access ordinances that and which make services available to everyone, but also making sure that the services, the materials are public-facing positions have a Spanish speaking or a threshold language requirement. That's generally a language that is spoken by a certain percentage of the population. And one of the ideas that I presented was that by January 1st, 2023, the city of Petaluma would implement an equal access to city services ordinance, similar to that of the city of Oakland or San Francisco, that would aim to remove language barriers for limited English speakers. And at this point, this population represents about 17% of the population. It's one that is, that we want to meaningfully engage and involve in our city government. And when they, I want to make sure that when they encounter city services, that they're able to access culturally competent, culturally sensitive, and linguistically appropriate services to promote meaningful participation for all people especially all people in the city of Petaluma, but certainly for limited English proficient individuals. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. And I think we have that on number 5. At least the headline is there, right? And your homework, or the homework has more detail in it. So thank you. I want to make one addition on number 9. Aaron actually pointed this out. Ingrid, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, so we want to add city employees in there. So, because that's the data report on diversity in all committees, commissions. We should take out that boards. We should take out and before boards. So just, yeah, so before boards, let's take out, yeah, and then the word and will go before city, right, perfect, thank you. Okay, all right, Susie?
Next is Catherine Welds.
Hi there. So really, I again am not going to take a lot of time reiterating what's already been said, other than to perhaps add a little bit onto number 12 to reach out to colleges and high schools. While I think it's really important to do that within our community here, Petaluma, Sonoma County, if we do that outside of our communities, outside of Sonoma County, we might have more diverse candidates if we go outside of our community. So I think it should start here, but expand out to reach out to other candidates.
Okay.
I wanted to add that. And then I do agree with pretty much everything that has been said here. No, everything that has been said here, but that being said, I have some secondhand knowledge from some city hiring because my mother and one of my best friends actually used to work in human resources. So all I would say about where we stand to Ramona and Faith's point is that a lot of what has been suggested here could probably be accomplished, but there are still a lot of rules around how you hire within municipalities. So a lot of the process really can't be changed because legally it has to be a certain way. So I think a lot can be implemented, but I just want to remind people that there are some parameters that you still have to stay within hiring practices. And then I know this is sort of on topic, but not totally, but hiring for police, with trying to get more diverse candidates for police is also very difficult in today's world. We have far fewer candidates who are applying. They have to make it through the training. They have to make it through a psych eval. They have to make it through a background investigation. So the pool of candidates tends to get very, very small. And so unless we have lots of people of color that are applying and can make it through that whole process, we're kind of limited to the best candidates and the best, who can make it through those hoops. So it does tend to limit who we can hire.
Okay, so thank you, Ramona. A couple of points. On number 12, I would like to add something there, Ingrid, please. Reach out to colleges and high schools to create pipeline of diverse candidates in Sonoma County. And I'm not wording this properly, outside, both within and external to Sonoma County. Yeah, okay. And the other thing I want to say, without getting into the, if you will, the wonky details of, hiring in municipalities or in any governmental or even quasi-governmental entity, I do want to say this. If you go to cities where they tend to have a larger population, BIPOC or LGBTQ++ populations, you tend to see more represented within those positions, within those cities or governmental entities. The issue is not that, and I don't think anybody's necessarily saying this, but the issue is not that those candidates can't make it through the process. The issue is you have to get more of them in the pool. And that's what the issue is. You have to attract more of them into the pool. So we want to keep that in mind. All right, let's go on to the next. Is that it? Or no, we still have a few more, I believe.
We have two more. Erin Wilson.
Hi, everyone. Okay.
Hi there.
So I also would like to echo and just shout out the points that were shared by Zaira, Anthony, Pedro, Joanna, and then just add in one point to highlight 17, the retention strategies for diverse employees. As we see now, more than ever, it's one thing to hire diverse employees. It's another thing to respect and retain said employees. So I just like to highlight that point, and I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you.
Luz Wire.
Hi, thanks everyone. So I just like to agree that assessment, we should start with an assessment of where we are. So number 9 seems to cover that. I think it's important to establish metrics, to set metrics. I don't know that that's in any of the squares, but if you don't set a metric and measure it, then that you can't really know if you're making progress. So I think that's important to not just do an initial assessment, but to do a periodic assessment. And then I completely agree with, looking at the current policies and review process, and probably to have an outside agency do that. That's probably the best way to get that done. And to look at the hiring process, the comments have been made about biases in the hiring process and having more diverse committees. I totally agree with that. I think that really assists with recruiting a more diverse pool, a larger pool, and even doing things like asking current employees who are from diverse backgrounds to refer people for hiring. That I think that's the research shows that's one of the ways to increase diversity. And then I also agree with 12 and 13 and 17, increasing the pipeline by reaching out to programs and providing mentoring, both for people coming in, understanding the jobs, and then also for retaining. I think those are really critical. Thanks.
Okay, so let's add a couple more here. Ingrid, are you ready? Okay, set metrics and assess periodically. I'll say set DEI metrics. Let's put that in there. It's not just any metrics. Set DEI metrics. I'm sorry. And assess periodically. Perfect. Okay, and then 19 is a referral program, I would say directed at current diverse employees, or directed toward current diverse employees. And that's not that well articulated, but y'all, you know what I'm trying to spit out here. Yep. Right. Okay. All right. Is that everyone?
Yes, Tracy, that's everyone. We do have Ramona Faith with their hand raised up.
Go ahead, Ramona.
I'm sorry, I missed something, and it's number 8. An annual training is not going to be enough to create the culture that we want to create to support DEI. In my opinion. I mean, when I look at the annual, it could be an online, check the box, you've done it, you completed your annual review. That's not going to cut it. And I'm not saying that just for the city, but organizations in general. Many businesses are starting to have to provide some training on anti-racism and biases. And it's not just about checking the dots and checking the boxes and having it done. So it really needs to, the training is ongoing, and it's, I mean, it is hard work, and the training's ongoing. And there's ways to incorporate monthly conversations or 15 or 20 minutes on an agenda once a month. I don't know what the answer is, but an annual training is not going to create the culture that's going to foster diversity and equity and inclusivity at the workplace.
So your point is well taken. So maybe it should be, we take out annual and put continuous, and that can be defined.
Yeah, I mean, the annual gives people maybe a baseline, but it's not going to change the culture.
Right.
So,
no, you're right.
Yeah, and maybe the consultants can help when we talk about strategies, right? Retention strategies. You can have the best processes in hiring, and you can hire the best people. And if the workplace environment is not inclusive, then those people won't stay. So it's really having to have kind of ongoing training conversations.
Right. And Ramona, I am holding back because that's what I do for a living, with clients is organizational change. I don't want to influence this process too much, but all I will say is you're spot on. Change does not happen once a year. It doesn't work that way. You have to embed it through all layers of the culture. Thank you. And I do want to bring up another point that Zaira brought up that is critically important. And I will say that it is critically important as somebody who's experienced this as a Black woman. And that is this whole notion of, in case you all haven't heard this term, misogynoir, and in the workplace, it's really, hatred and drama, if you will, directed at women of color, particularly Black women, in the workplace. And just, I don't know if we put that in there, but I do think this is a moment where we need to really consider that women of color are put through the ringer. Even more women are put through, but women of color, there's lots of studies on this. And if you'd like to see a real-time example of this, a client called me today and told me to look at Variety. There's an article in Variety magazine today by Meghan McCain about why she left The View and claimed it was all Whoopi Goldberg who was creating a hostile workplace. And it's an interesting trend that we're seeing, that when women of color, particularly Black women, speak up and stand up for what is right by them, it becomes this reverse, if you will, hostile workplace. So, and it's another tool that is unfortunately used against women of color. We're held to a very different standard, and particularly Black women. So I didn't want Zaira's point to not be amplified. It's critical to recognize that happens. So we have, we're doing really well on time, and I think that's because we have a smaller group. I would like to open it up and maybe the gallery view before we vote. If people want to have more of a conversation or have more thoughts on any of these topics before we go to a vote.
And Tracy, we do have a bunch of hands raised now.
Okay, go, and I'll let the city call on them because I'm terrible at that for some reason.
Sounds good. Ramona, you still have your hand up? Are you still looking to speak? Okay. We have Catherine, followed by Mike, followed by Zaira.
I just actually wanted to piggyback onto Ramona's point and ask if we could add within that number 8, because I loved what Joanna brought up earlier, that she on those hiring teams do that anti-bias training right before they're going to be doing some hiring. So perhaps that could also be included in that number 8. So it's continuous, but also very specific to hiring teams.
Oh, yeah, Ingrid, if you could put in there, let's say, how do we want to say this? Because we don't want to exclude all the other areas, but we could say especially for hiring teams.
committees.
Yeah, hiring committees. Yeah. Okay.
So it would be on the spot in that moment, which I think is great.
Right. That's very good. So I'm sure Ingrid captured that. She's good. Okay. All right. I'm letting the city call on folks.
We have Mike followed by Zaira.
Hi. Again, I just wanted to, and again, I don't want to take away from any of the other points that anyone has made, because I think they're all excellent points and very valid. But I just want to advocate again that I think an effective strategy would really be focusing on the youth. And I'll give a little bit of my own experience, right? I work in technology, and I think that as a group, it has lacked a lot of diversity, cultural diversity, and also it sometimes has been very misogynistic and sort of an all the boys club. And I think when we tried to sort of approach that with, well, let's change our culture and let's do training and let's, I think it was really difficult. You had a lot of people that had been there a long time. It sort of created a culture that they were comfortable in. And it always felt like a foreign bubble for other people trying to come in. And I think when we really focused on youth, focused on internships, focused on reaching out to schools, really focused on getting younger, it was a benefit to them because it gave them valuable experience at a time when they needed it. And it was a benefit to us because then we could hire those people after those internships. As we got younger, our culture really started to change in a meaningful way. So I would just like to advocate again that I think an effective strategy might be looking at really pursuing youth and reaching out to schools and creating a pipeline that brings more students and more youth into our civic discourse as a way to back into, if you will, more diversity and inclusion.
So Mike, thank you. So Ingrid, maybe under one of the ones where we were talking about youth, we put a parentheses including internships. Because that's a really critical way to get people in the door. But one of the points that I really want to emphasize is I think it's a great idea. I know I benefited from that when I was young, but they have to have a sponsor, and hopefully of color or LGBTQ++, something that can help them navigate that system. Because just because you bring them in as an intern doesn't mean that it's going to be a welcoming environment or it's going to be a productive experience. In matter of fact, it can be a very negative experience if they don't have some sort of an ambassador or mentor. So maybe we put intern / mentorship, something like that, under the youth. And we'll look at these again before we vote. I trust Ingrid to capture all this really well. So, all right, Aaron, who's next?
We have Zaira followed by Luke.
Okay.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Tracy, for actually saying that. I wanted to say, myself as a queer woman of color, Latinx, immigrant, I know I go through my lived experiences. However, I do have to uplift that here in Petaluma, we have, like Joanna said, 1% of Black community. Unfortunately, Petaluma is anti-Blackness, and it has been shown in many examples in our schools. For examples, Spirit Week occurred and folks did USA theme or Western theme. That already sets a precedent of what we can expect. And like what Mike said, our schools and our youth need to really be integrated and understand what it is to be culturally aware, culturally responsive, and culturally, sensitive to things. And within the workplace, as much as, again, I love the idea to bring in, again, youth, people of color in our city at all levels. However, we need to just acknowledge that anti-Blackness and aggression in the workplace does exist within Petaluma. And that's something that we really need to work towards. So thank you.
Thank you.
Lou followed by Pedro.
Yeah, could you bring up the slides again, the slide with all the things on it? So what I wanted to say is, when I think about voting for 3 of these, or even 5, or even 5 of them, it seems to me that there are things that are in separate squares that actually belong together with other things, or would be aspects of other things, like setting DEI metrics and periodically assessing. That could be part of 9. That is part of taking a process of taking an assessment and doing having a data component to look at. And the same thing with 19 referral program directed towards employees and retention strategies. Well, no, that's so 19 is really about the hiring committees, how the hiring process, reviewing that and having more sound strategies for increasing diversity in the hiring, which actually I don't think is in any square. Is it in any square? I don't know. There's so many of them. So I'm worried that there are many good ideas on the screen, and I do think that some of them are subsets or belong with other ones, and that if we're told to vote for 3, a lot of good things are going to be left out. And I'm not advocating that we put things that don't belong together, but I am saying that, like, the one that I mentioned, I think is a good example. of setting metrics and assessing them, I do think that belongs with 9. I don't think that's a separate thing.
So, Lou, you bring up a really good point, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say something that is completely antithetical to the way we've been running this process. And actually, when we had the pre-meeting, when I had the pre-meeting with the city, one of the things that came up, because I gave them a preview, of some of these ideas, is, my gosh, they're all great ideas. So what I'm wondering is, I think we should still vote and maybe, pick what are the top 5, but council will see all of these. They will absolutely see all of these. I think in this category, because this is the structural basis, right, for really making change. You've got to have representation matters, and you have to have representation at the table, and at the table where the decisions are made. And all of these ideas have merit. So I'd love to discuss this more with the committee. So what I'm saying is a slight diversion on this topic, which is, let's pick the top 5, maybe even 6, but that doesn't mean that the rest of these are excluded. I think on the other topics, we were able to narrow it down a bit, but I think this one, there was a lot of energy on it, because I think the folks on this committee realize that this is where you start really making changes. I'm not saying, because this impacts the police. This is citywide we're talking about here. This impacts all branches. So thoughts?
Tracy, I do want to acknowledge.
If you're saying that you were picking 5 or 6, that makes the problem that I was describing less problematic. But
yeah, but I do want to go on record that all of these are going to be sent. Okay, they're going to see that. Okay, Aaron.
Yeah, I do want to acknowledge Peggy with their hand raised.
Oh, Peggy. Can we go back to gallery view? That'd be great. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the committee, because I was super excited to see the recommendations. As a city that is rebuilding, we're actually tracking with a majority of these. I think the only exception, and I'm going to be looking into that, is Pedro, your point about the ordinance, the model ordinance. But other than that, the diversity officer, I was so excited when I saw this, and I said, can't we just, we're going to be tracking all of these. So even if you pick your top 5, there are many things that the city's already doing, already putting in place. I can't tell you how excited and honored I was that you put so much time and effort into your homework. I'm going to be using this as we rebuild the city. This is the time to do it. And it's super exciting. And I told Tracy, and she said, but that's different than what we've done before. And I said, but I thought they were all great ideas and essential, not just great ideas. I think they were essential for rebuilding our city. So I just want to thank everybody and recognize the hard and thoughtful work that you put into this. And I'm going to be proud to be bringing this to council with our recommendations and putting a plan in motion. So just wanted to say that. Sorry for taking the extra time, but wanted you to know that.
Thank you, Peggy. So do we have other hands? Yeah.
Yes, so we have Pedro, followed by Faith.
Thank you. And so I just wanted to speak a little bit more about the equal access ordinance, just in terms of, I wasn't living, but I was working in the city of Oakland when it was implemented. And it was actually a coalition of Latino and Asian American communities that came together to move that legislation forward, that ordinance forward, because they weren't represented in city government. In the course of 5 years, it did significant, the hiring, being able to give preference to language minorities in the hiring process. And of course, anyone can speak Spanish or Cantonese or Vietnamese or whatever the threshold languages are, but being able to give preference to, in a way that isn't always available to racial minorities because of current law, really helped to diversify the city of Oakland and even the city of San Francisco. both in the police department, and I actually was working very closely with the mayor at the time, Mayor Jerry Brown, and various others as we were moving this forward. And it was great to see how quickly an ordinance like this was able to make change, because many of the positions that were focused were those positions where there's quite a bit of turnover. And so by giving folks a slight preference, oftentimes they were able to make it through the application pool. And yes, it's specifically for language minorities, and I believe there was an effort actually to try to make Ebonics a language at that time. So you'll remember that was part of the conversation.
Oh boy,
make Ebonics a language for the purposes of this specific, this and other specific ordinances across the state. But it was very successful in moving in meeting the needs of the language minorities in those communities, and I believe it's much more representative now. And something like this, at that time, if memory serves me, the Latino community was only about 15% of Oakland's population, and Asian American was also, I mean, it's much higher now. But it happened when they were together, combined, I believe they were 25% of the population. And so it was a pivotal point. And in Petaluma right now, language minorities represent about 17 to, at least in Petaluma, I believe it's 17% is what I've seen. And so it's, I think it essentially creates a pathway for meaningful participation for folks who may not speak English, so that they can access all aspects of government. Thank you.
Great. Well, Peggy, you have a resource there, as you go forward with Pedro. Okay, wonderful. All right, thank you.
Faith, followed by Eric.
Thank you. I agree with what Lou said and what Peggy. I am so against us trying to vote for 4 or 5 or whatever it's going to be of this. All of this is a part of what we're trying to say to the city. And to try and pick a few bits of that, I think is unfair to the work that we've done. Actually, we could spend that time doing something else, like looking back at some of the work that we did and trying to firm that up. Maybe I don't know, but I think that this diversity in city hiring is at the top of what we need to be looking at, because it is our city. And if we can make a change in that, then we can really make a change in our community. And I just feel like let's not screw around with it too much.
Well, I hear you, Faith. Let me ask you a question. Do you think, and this is not I'm not putting bias or attempting to take bias out of the question, but I want to ask it. Do you think there's any merit in still having a vote so the council sees where the energy went, or should we just present all of these as they are? What are your thoughts?
The energy went into all of it.
Okay.
In my opinion. There are a few things that look like they could be put together, like when you talk about hiring an organization or something. Yeah, some of that may be able to be worked together. But for the most part, you're talking about things that really are relevant to this process.
I absolutely can see that. I can see that. I could wholeheartedly stand behind giving this whole slate, if you will, to the city, to the council, along with the homework, because I'm going to send the verbatim in that we've already done. And because this is, as I said earlier, foundational. So what do people think about that? Well, I know I think Eric had his hand up, and then I would love to get feedback on that.
Thank you. I would just echo that. I mean, I guess I've learned a lot, and first I'd like to thank everybody for sharing so much in these meetings, because I have learned a ton. And one of the maybe strange things I've learned is when confronted with a lot of proposals for what we should do, and when they're really good, I immediately leap to like a structural solution. I always feel like, oh, I want to vote for one of these or 3 of these or 5 of these, but I end up voting for the thing that sets up a structure to get them all done, right? That's like
Hmm.
where I've gone on every
Mhm.
meeting. And so I would say if you told us cast your 3 votes, your 2 votes, your 5 votes, I would be putting my 2, 3, 5 votes on the consultant and the Office of Equity, right? Because
Mhm.
those are the things that I can say the agenda for those 2 projects would be basically everything else on the page, right? So to that end, I would just conclude by saying, yeah, I would support, in a sense, sending this whole slate. I'm heartened to hear that that's already on the city's radar, but that's where I would go on my vote.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And Tracy, the last 2 hands up that we have are Catherine, followed by Julia.
Okay.
I actually just want to echo what Eric just said and Faith, is that it sounds to me, based on what Peggy just mentioned a little while ago, that the city is already doing some of these things, and voting and trying to put our priorities, granted, that's what the city council is looking for, right? Our priorities. But if they're already doing a lot of these things, and to Peggy's point, all of these are really, really important, and she'd love to see them all be addressed and move forward. I don't see the purpose of us going through all of that work of reducing our votes down to 5. It sounds to me, I'm just agreeing basically with what has been said.
Okay. Thank you.
Julia?
Hi, I think that as well. A lot of work has been put into it, and I think it's all very viable. But I would like to also, somebody mentioned in the very beginning about having fresh eyes to look at something. And I know there was a lot of angst about only wanting people on this committee, for example, who lived in Petaluma. But I think that's a really missed opportunity. I have 2 things. One is I definitely think an outside independent consultant or agency to be able to really kind of guide this whole process forward is going to be extremely important. And then the other thing is that having the fresh eyes, I mean, with Petaluma, it's such a destination place too. You're going to have more people moving from San Francisco and other places because it is such a nice community, but it's complicated because you have parents and families who have been there for a long period of time, who have this legacy family, but then you have people coming in just to have second homes. Then you have people who are attending there just to go to private school. But if those people aren't included in the fabric and fold of what's going to make your community, I think it's a missed opportunity, because there was a lot of angst about whether or not I should even be on the committee based on the fact that I don't technically live in Petaluma. But as your city grows and the more welcoming you are and the more diverse you will be, I hope it's a platform to really be able to have empathy, and you have to have that kindness so that it is really truly welcoming, and it's complicated. So I really just wanted to put that out there about the fresh eyes is, I think, incredibly important.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone else like to share input here? No other hands up, Aaron?
No other hands raised currently.
Okay. Well, let's do this. Let's just take a vote about putting forth this entire slate. And let's do it the other way. Are there any nays? Raise your hand if there's a nay. Julia, did you raise your hand, or is that your hand from before? Okay, okay.
No, I was just adjusting to gallery. Sorry.
Okay.
I think we should definitely send this the way it is. Thank you.
Okay. All right. It looks like we will send it the way it is. Thank you. And this is really, give yourselves a round of applause, because this was a lot of work that went into this. And these are the, some of these are what, when I'm doing consulting engagements, some of them are strategic, some of them are tactical, but they're all equally as important. And I think we need, and some of these ideas, if we just condense these down to 2 or 3 or 4, we may miss some of the nuance in some of these ideas. And I think it's really, really critical. So great, wonderful work. So now what I'd like to do is, let's go bring the slide deck back up for a second, if we might. And let's go back and review the work that we've done. Let's keep going forward, please. We're looking for the one that says police and community. There we are. So we have some time. And we may finish, well, I always say this and then we don't, but we may finish early today, this evening. But I want to take the time and review what we put forth so far. So for the police and community, these were the top 3 recommendations. Establish independent, adequately funded, empowered civilian/community, not city staff, police oversight body, and fully populated by the end of the year. Purpose, membership, charter, standing authority, March populated. A committee to identify ways to increase dialogue, build relationships, humanize police community, and embrace restorative justice. Education, engagement, dialogue to build relationships, humanize police and community members. And then 3, committee to review and recommend ongoing police training regarding DEI, anti-bias, de-escalation, and use of weapons. We can discuss, we have time here. We have these, and then there are 10 more recommendations that we came up with. Does anybody have comments on this and police in the community? This is, we actually have the luxury of having some time. So if we want to go back to gallery, or if you want me to keep this up, whatever is easiest for the committee members.
Catherine, followed by Mike.
Okay.
I'm actually just looking for clarification. Was that 3 separate committees that we're trying to establish, or is that one committee that's going to be doing all of those things? Because that's a lot of people doing a lot of stuff.
It was not clear, it was not specified, during the conversation. And so, and we can talk about that now. And I know, Mike, you probably have some thoughts on this. I think you probably do. And whether they're 3 separate committees or not, I mean, it's pretty clear that this committee felt that these are 3 things that must be done in terms of police in the community.
Sure,
a good question, but it's not crystal clear.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay. I'm letting the city.
Mike.
Okay.
Sorry, followed by Zara.
Hi, I think it's great that we're sort of talking about this, especially given what's sort of happened recently in Petaluma with retired Officer Lance Navallo and Elizabeth Cole, student at Santa Rosa Community College. I think is another example of where there are some systemic and structural issues with policing communities of color that I think are relevant across this country, and I think definitely are relevant here in Petaluma. I was disappointed with the judge's decision not to release the body cam footage. I understand that there's a desire to protect the retired officers' right to a fair trial, but I also feel like when police officers make the choice, and it is choice to serve, that there are certain freedoms that we should empower these communities to look at creating a framework that allows us as the citizens to always get more oversight and input, and to always be able to view this footage when they are walking around with a badge and a weapon, which I've said before, I think, whether they pull the weapon out of the holster or not, that weapon is a use of force because it's an implied use of force. I think that we should always have the right to see that body camera footage. I think it's these type of structures, as well as sort of qualified immunity and other things that I think create this framework that allows for policing that I know Chief Savano doesn't condone or doesn't want to see perpetuated, allows it to exist in a way that I think that this group, the reason we put forward some of these things was our way of saying, hey, we think we can police better in Petaluma. And regardless of whether it's 1 committee or 3 committees, I would just really like to see the city continue to focus on that as a way to make people of color and every marginalized group here in Petaluma feel safe and feel welcome.
Thank you, Mike.
Zara, followed by Eric.
Yeah, thanks so much. So again, I'm just gonna reiterate what I've mentioned before of why we need police civilian oversight, because it protects human rights, it promotes constitutional policing, increases public confidence and trust in the police, builds bridges between law enforcement and the public, supports effective policing, ensures greater accountability, and enhances risk management. Mike just gave one example. Another example too is we had a bomb threat at Casa Grande. There was some kind of miscommunication between messaging, whether or not it was a credible threat or it wasn't a credible threat. With a civilian oversight, we can review these policies, the organizational structure, the protocols, and if it was an honest mistake, it can be fixed by reviewing these protocols and ensuring that we don't make these same mistakes again. Another example is also the drug use that was found behind the Petaluma Library. Was it tested? How was tested? That's again another example of why we need civilian oversight to ensure that these policies, structures, protocols are all in place and that they're being followed. So that's what I wanted to bring the strong recommendation for the independent civilian oversight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Eric?
Yeah, I won't say much because I just want to double underscore what Mike and Zaira both said. The one other point on independent citizen civilian oversight. You know, we're all experts in various ways, and we all have lived experiences. And I think it's really important to recognize that policing is something working on safety is something we can do as a community. And we all have something to say about it that's vital and important. And we shouldn't be seeing this as sort of this expertise that's kind of vaulted with among certain folks that have a certain way and a style of having learned this, through the cycles and the processes of traditional policing. And we've seen this over and over again in communities across the United States and the world. When you really do open this up for oversight and participation from the community, we get great results. So just another word of support for independent oversight. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Tracy has the last hand raised.
Okay, all right. So thank you for comments on that. Somebody pinged me and said, are these individual stories important or should we stick to the broader? And, my response was that these individual stories and lived experiences in some instances are the very foundation of DEI work. I mean, this is, you got to hear, what people experience. You have to hear it. You have to even try to feel it. I'll talk about that at the end. So I think this is important. So thank you. If there aren't any more comments on police in the community, let's pull the slide deck back up and go to the next slate, if you will, that we came up with, which was increased diversity in schools. Now, I know there was a lot of conversation. Well, the city doesn't have any quota, and I'm going to use a legal term, which Eric is going to shoot me an email. But the city doesn't have jurisdiction, as it will, over the schools. They can't necessarily tell the schools what to do. But these are thoughts about that this committee had, feelings and proposals as to what could be done to make Petaluma more inclusive, review hiring practices to ensure the recruitment of a more diverse workforce, and diversity is defined along all lines. City council should use the pandemic relief funds and partner with our schools in our city to confront disparities that students and their parents contend with in Petaluma. The new permanent commission on race relations and public safety should engage school administrators, parents, community groups, and local agencies to identify successes and gaps in DEI initiatives for staffing and hiring. The commission should recommend a citywide standard to create an enduring model for Petaluma. All Petaluma public schools would provide multiple site-based school-wide assemblies that recognize Diversity Heritage Month and revisit the $8.3 million spending proposal and redirect some of the city hall renovations to help increase diversity awareness and visibility in our schools. So are there further comments on this? Do we need to massage this? What these recommendations? We could probably go to gallery view and see if people have comments.
Zara?
I just have one clarification. And then I think this is more directed for our city manager, Peggy. Have the pandemic relief funds already been allocated? Because I feel like some of these recommendations, those things are passed, and I don't know if we can do those.
So Zaira, thanks for that question. It was approved by council, but like everything else, those are budgets. So as we, flesh out the actual project, if there's any, if there are any funds, aside from that, we also set aside 650,000, I think. And Brian, you can speak to that. I wasn't at that council meeting, so I'm not going to speak eloquently about it, but there was $650,000 that were set aside from the 8.3 that have not been programmed. But everything that doesn't get spent, we'll be bringing back to council to have a discussion on how best to invest that money.
Got it. That answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Faith? Faith, they're
You're on
currently
mute.
muted, by the
You're
way.
mute.
Just a minute, okay.
Okay.
So, I don't have a problem with the recommendations that are there, but I want to recommend that we all look at the score report that they made, because that report showed that the students of color within Sonoma County are not seeing people that look like them, and therefore they're having problems within the school. The other thing is that they're having other problems too. So I think it's important that we really we look at these issues very carefully. Our city and our various school districts look at it and make sure that we look at the children of color that are in these schools, and we bring forth ideas and have teachers. I guess I'm saying this all wrong, but I'm really concerned about our kids of color in our schools, that they be represented with teachers and staff that look like them, and that's not happening right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Faith.
Joanna, followed by Ramona.
Recently, I did a school visit to McDowell School, and Dennis Posike asked to come along with me. And I don't know, Peggy, maybe I don't know how often city council people are going and doing tours of the schools. Joel, maybe, I don't know if you've ever seen any city council people come through Corona Creek. Sanja, I don't know if you've seen any come through Old Adobe schools. And so I think these are great recommendations and goals, but also if the city staff and if city council don't even know what's going on at the schools, just even day to day, then I just think that should be a first step, because I don't think they can progress unless they know, like, Joel, what were you teaching in your class? Like, I've had the pleasure of having Joel teach 3 of my kids. He's an excellent teacher, and just seeing all the things that he's doing, how diverse his curriculum is, how inclusive it is, where there might be other teachers that aren't. So just looking at, again, like systemically, like how different are different classrooms and schools, not just like the different schools within one district, but as a whole. Like, we have so many schools in this town. So I think just getting an idea. And Zaira touched on this again, and like how that intertwines with like PPD and the response. There was the bomb threat, and there was just a lot of upset in town about how it was handled by the schools, by PPD. I just think that we could do more talking and working together, but I think a first step would just be them just visiting our campuses.
Should we add that? Does the group think that we should add a bullet that the city council should consider, visiting the different school campuses on a regular basis? Is that something we should add, or what do people think?
And Tracy, we do have Peggy with her hand raised.
Okay.
Can I just add something? So, Joanna, that's a really good point. And recently I met with your superintendent, and we are trying to minimally convene a like tabletop exercises for emergency response and emergency preparedness with all of our 9 school districts, and work very closely, just because that's such a key communication loop for us on just emergency response, emergency preparedness, making sure our schools know who to contact, making sure we know who to contact. So some of the basic stuff, just setting up, just on that level, that communication. So I think it's going to really open the door for a lot more interaction and collaboration. So just want to let you know that.
All right, thank you, Peggy. Was
Ramona.
Ramona next? Okay.
Yes, followed by Mike.
Yes, thank you. I just have I'm struggling with something, and maybe it's probably just me, but I was the one that advocated for community-wide, that the entire community needs education on DEI, not just city government, not just the schools. So I'm not quite sure why we pulled out schools. I know that the police did work closely with the schools. I know that there's a lot of partnerships there, or trying to create different partnerships, but there's the chamber, there's businesses, and the students have parents who work in these businesses and organizations, right? So I just think that the training is across the board. And I do struggle with the city. The city can't tell the schools what they need to do. They can make recommendations, but they can make recommendations to all organizations in the city of Petaluma. So, a lot of times the kids, depending on how their parents feel about different issues, they learn from their parents. So I just think that I'm not quite sure why we just pulled out schools. Not that schools aren't important. I love schools, and the Petaluma Healthcare District also works very closely with the schools. But there's also other organizations that need the support too. So, and the training and all that. So I'm just struggling with why it's just schools.
Ramona, thank you for that. And you're absolutely right. When diversity is done right, or any systemic change is done right, you touch all of the spokes on the wheel, right? You go all the way around. But I want to say this, there was a lot of energy around highlighting schools, because as a student, when I was a kid, many moons ago, when Tyrannosaurus Rex walked there, that, I was incredibly harmed in school, because kids are so vulnerable, and you have these adults in an authority, figures in authority positions of authority that can do harm, and the curriculum can do harm. So I think I don't want us to dismiss the importance of uplifting the schools to become much more diverse, to become much more inclusive in what they teach, and in not just in what they teach, but in how they deal with kids that are different, if you will, than that aren't white male, okay, and white straight male. So how do we? I think, in my opinion, looking back, because I was looking back over the work we did, there was a lot of energy there, and my sense was that's kind of what's behind it. But I would love to hear from the group. And I know we have hands up, so lots of hands up. Wow. Okay.
We have Mike, followed by Zaira.
Hi, I'll try and go quick to sort of move this along. I'm very much in support of us sort of doing everything we can to reach out to youth and reach out to the schools. It sounds cliche, but they are our future. And I think that we as adults in the community really need to outwardly support that in a lot of ways. However, I do think we need to be careful that we really listen to the educators and the people that are in the schools, because I think I've been seeing a trend across the country where our school boards and school PTA meetings have become severely politicized, especially around race and CRT and things of that nature, mask wearing. And I think in its best ideals, sort of the school board was created to be an apolitical group, and was created to be a group that could stand outside of politics and outside of government, so that they could advocate for our kids and for the best education that they could get. It was supposed to be something that, regardless of our political leanings, we could all agree that we wanted our kids to have the absolute best opportunity to have the best education, regardless of who you voted for in the last election. So I would just say whatever we recommend for the city to do or for the school boards to do, that we be very careful that we don't open the door to this trend of sort of politicizing our children's education.
Okay. Who's next?
Zaira, followed by Joel.
Yeah, actually, I was going to set the same example that Mike brought up, but I guess I'll use another example of why I think schools need to be part of this conversation. Just to kind of give of an example, going back to, again, the bomb threat, right? It was through an app called Stop It. Stop It is an app that is intentional to have students anonymously report bullying, harassment, and so forth. Something that I guess folks weren't aware of is that, unfortunately, because an investigation needed to happen, Stop It has now been compromised. So now students might not feel safe to be, safe to report bullying or harassment because of what has occurred. Another thing is while you have a 12-hour investigation, dogs around, police around in a school environment, you are going to be triggering your student body, specifically Black and brown students. Another thing that folks might have not maybe missed the mark is those with, different disabilities too. There was one parent who checked out their kid, and their kid was in anxiety waiting, like just terrified of like what's going on, and they couldn't settle their kid down. So again, it's that not being aware of just what we're compromising in order to provide that public safety in our schools. Thank you.
Very interesting. Thank you. Okay, who was next?
Joel, followed by Faith.
Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to make comment about how critical I think having diversity and equity and inclusion in our schools is. It is the first place we should start, I believe, because when you begin with the youth can change the opinions and the ideas of the adults, because ultimately, I think 99.9% of parents have opinions of things, but when it becomes directly related to them, their opinions can change drastically. When something becomes meaningful to them because of their experience their child has had, it changes their viewpoint of what their adult outlook is drastically. For me as an educator, it is 110% imperative that my students see themselves represented within my classroom. I'm talking about within the curriculum. I'm talking about within the literature that I share. I'm talking about every facet of my classroom, no matter if you're brown, Black, white, albino, you should be represented within a classroom, because when you see yourself represented in society and in stories that connect to you and your life, it opens the world to the possibilities of what you can do. I was fortunate enough to have Faith Ross reach out to me a few months ago regarding some resources for our African-American students. And unfortunately in my district, that is a very small population. I think in my 22 years in my district, we've had one African-American woman come through our school as a student teacher. That's the only African-American I've seen come through our school. We've had several Latina staff members, which is critical for our Latino and Latina children, which is our second highest population besides Caucasian. But I think, to go back with Ramona's question is, why was the focus so much on schools? I really think that if we can enlighten the children to the representation of the people around them, I don't believe that that has to be a political issue. I think adult minds make it a political issue. However, I think children see the world as it is. They see the world as it is in front of them. They accept each other for who they are. And the biases do not come until the adults input those biases into their children. And again, what I want to say is when we have experiences that children have discussions with their parents about at the dinner table, on car drives, those discussions will change minds. And so I believe everything we do should always go back to the children. It shouldn't be politicized because we're all human beings. We need to teach respect and, you know, I hate the word tolerance. It makes me think like we're tolerating someone. Acceptance is the word I would use because we're all humans, human beings. We don't need to tolerate anyone. We need to accept everyone because we all have the right to be here, whether we agree with people or not. So I always advocate going back to schools and showing the representation of each and every ethnicity, diverse group, gender groups, sexual groups, and you know, of course, in age appropriate ways, of course. But I think it comes back to the schools. That's where you can change the entire society by starting with those children. So thank you so much for my time, and thanks, Joanna, for the little shout out there.
Thank you, Joel. Faith?
Thank you, Joel. I really appreciate what you had to say. I just wanted to go back to something that I think Superintendent Laurie said when we were talking about the schools, and that was the whole reason that we brought up schools and had recommendations for them is because they are such an important part of our community. This is where our community is going to come from. And my youngest son said that when he graduated from high school and he went on to college, he said, "Mom, I never had a Black teacher. I didn't have anybody that looked like me and come into my class. I felt bad because I was the one who chose Petaluma." And so my idea is that we need to, as much as possible, speak out and say what we can. Supervisor Laurie, I think, said something about the community being the school, the community, and home. We can't go into homes as community members within this organization, within this committee, but we can make recommendations to our schools. We can make recommendations to our city and stuff. And through those things, hopefully, we can have an effect on homes. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to chime in here because I think it was Ramona who was talking about businesses, also being a key part of this. And I agree with you. The businesses, once again, you can't tell businesses what to do, right? And you can't tell a private entity within certain bounds what to do. But the chamber, for example, and then the various business organizations can offer, can bring in DEI consultants, can offer learning sessions, can do dialogue circles on this. That's also a critical part, because as a woman of color, if I walk into a business in Petaluma and I'm not greeted properly, but a white woman next to me is, I'm going to feel some sort of way about that. With my personality, I'm going to say something, but not everybody will. And some people will just be very hurt and turn around and walk out and have a very negative feeling. So businesses, whatever type it is, they also do need to take ownership over this issue. So I didn't want you to think that we were completely negating that, because that's an important part of the community. But they also have to take some initiative on their own. So I think Joel had his hand up.
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to add because of something that Faith had said. We do have a voice in what happens in our schools, and those are called school board elections. And I would highly encourage every single citizen within the city of Petaluma or any city you live in to know the school board members on your school district board, because that is the first step to being allowed, not to be allowed, to make change happen. And unfortunately, we get so overwhelmed by everything that's going on in our world. We in our communities, even we see those names on the ballot of school board member, Adobe School District. Okay, this person sounds good. This person sounds good. It is imperative that we as citizens of this city understand who those people are, how long they've been on those boards, what views they hold, and what views that they bring to the school district. Because I think there are times when school board members continue to serve as incumbents because, you know, they have the time to do it. People are going to let them do it because they don't have the time. Unfortunately, if we want change to happen, we need to become active. We need to be the ones who are going out there and speaking to our community. The teachers need to go out there and say, these are the people who we support that are going to bring diversity to our schools, who are going to bring equality to our schools, who are going to bring inclusion to our schools. And we don't need our schools to just be, you know, this one school is a champion of Hispanic rights and this one school's a champion of his African-American rights, and the people of those ethnicities go to those schools. It needs to be across the board. And so we need to, as citizens, become so involved in our board elections and know who are the people making these giant decisions, because the decisions matter, the decisions count, and our children are the ones that are the recipients of the decisions by those people. So we need to make sure that the people that are on our school boards are the people that are going to promote DEI, that are going to promote BIPOC populations, that are going to promote LGBTQIA+ populations. We're all human beings again, and we need to treat each other as such, and we need to educate our students and our children into a more inclusive world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Any other conversation on this topic?
Yes, Catherine.
Just wanted to thank you and Ramona for pointing out, you know, other places in the community like the business. That's why I'm, you know, here to represent the Chamber of Commerce. And this is why we engaged here, so that we can start to learn, that we can partner with the city, so that we can do what our part in helping business owners and small businesses in this community to learn and grow and develop good anti-bias training and programs, so that we can all get better in the community. So I just, that's why we're here. And being part of the community, this is another outreach, and I just appreciate your mentioning it.
Sure, absolutely. It's critical. One of the critical spokes in the wheel. So thank you. All right. So if no one, Sandra? Okay. Sandra, did you have your hand? Oh, yeah, there you are. Okay.
Yeah, I did. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I wasn't sure if I was going to share as I listened in, you know, to the conversation, but it's hard sitting by and not sharing, because I hear all of you expressing, you know, your ideas about what we can do as a community and as a city. And, you know, as we are sharing tonight, there are so many injustices happening every day. You know, a lot of what you're sharing tonight about, you know, some of the solutions, some of the actions that are needed, they are needed. And I think that a little bit of what we haven't expressed is a lot of how what happens in this community is so driven by white supremacy and anti-Blackness that it's like in all the underpinnings of a lot of the decisions, and who gets chosen for what, and who gets to be on councils and boards and committees and all of the power structures are the reasons why we need this committee, and the reasons why we're doing, you know, trying to engage in the actions that we're trying to engage in. But it's almost, for me, I'll just speak for myself, as a woman, as a Black woman, and a leadership role in this city, it's almost like I am dehumanized every day. That's what happens to me. I'm literally dehumanized every day. And people don't even recognize me as a human, as a mom, as a wife, right? As a person that is, has livelihood like anybody else, in a job and in a role. And I literally came here to serve children and families. That's it. I came to connect with this community and learn about the community, and really thought that, I could just get me a little crash pad. And, once my daughter, who's a junior in high school, once we carted her off, we can find a little place here. And I have been the welcoming crew disappeared, and who showed up at the door was it just been incredulous. And I'm sharing that because I know what Joanna was thinking as you all were sharing in the last 5 minutes. I know what Kenyatta was thinking in the last 5 minutes as you all, were sharing. And we can't even tell it all. Like, honestly, we literally can't even tell it all. Because even the members' names on this committee was circulating around the Odadobi community. Like, we're some secret society that is in charge of CRT in the city of Petaluma. This committee.
CRT is
literally
critical race theory, if people don't know.
This committee is some secret society that is in charge of taking over Petaluma. So I feel like I'm rambling at this point, but
no, you're not. You're speaking from your heart.
I just wanted to share that.
Sandra, thank you so much for sharing, and so sorry for your pain. So sorry for your pain. And this is real. I mean, this is why this committee is here. Okay. At the end of the day, this is why this committee is here. It's not some theoretical construct that, oh, it's nice to do. No, it's cost the city a lot of money. It's cost a lot of money from all of you in terms of your time. Your time is very valuable. Your psychic energy, your emotional energy, it's taxing, but it's here because of stories like that, because of stories we've heard from Kenyatta, because of stories we've heard from Zaira and Joanna and Mike and others and all of you. We've heard stories. White supremacy is real, and the constructs of it are real. This is not some subversive committee that's trying to take over the city. It's trying to work with the city. And I will tell you that every person I've worked with on the city side has been committed to this work. You may not agree with all of their points of view, but they're committed to this. Otherwise, I wouldn't keep working with them. And I told them that I quit. So don't give up. As hard as I really want to curse right now, but I won't. It would be unprofessional. To do this, it's hard to hear stories like that. And it really should touch you in your heart, because for a person to tell you they feel dehumanized, well, what's the difference between that and 1619? What's the difference between that and the civil rights? What happened during the fight for civil rights, and then going further back at Reconstruction? There's no difference. It hurts like I don't know what, and people die because of it. People's lives, it can progress where people lose their lives. So this work that you all are doing is so important. And you cannot let the narratives of those who are very, very afraid of giving up power and things changing deter you from your focus on completing this work. I mean, there's no completion of this work. This is a continuous process, but on changing the power construct so it's more inclusive, because it can be done and it will be done. Anybody else have any comments or want to share anything? We haven't been able to have these kind of conversations because we've been so focused. We had distractions early on. We won't mention those. We had, things dust up. We had stuff happen, but this is what this is about. Does anybody else want to share or contribute?
Yeah. First of all, I just want to say, Petaluma should be embarrassed of hearing the lived experiences of Superintendent Lowry. And this isn't me crying, this is me frustrated. For how many times I have told y'all this is happening right here in your city, in your backyard, in your schools. I've been a target of harassment, bullying. I've also been a target of that narrative of ruffling feathers. I'm not the only one. I'm not here to, anyways, what Lowry just shared with us is the reality in Petaluma. It's why I'm on this ad hoc committee. It's why I'm always outspoken, and I will tell it to you, even if it's going to ruffle some feathers. The reality is that white supremacy is embedded in Petaluma. And Lowry is not the only one, not the only Black person in Petaluma who has experienced that. That's all I got to say. And if Petaluma needs to wake up, like, wake up.
Thank you, Zaira. Joanna?
I just want to also acknowledge and thank Sandra for what you said, for being so candid, Zaira as well, just for expressing your frustration. We need to hear it, and Joel as well for what you said. I agree with so much what you said. It's really important to know who's representing you, not just citywide, but also locally, like locally down to your neighborhood. These are your neighborhood schools. And also what Zaira said about, and Sandra as well, about the white supremacy and just again, the systems, like I had referred to earlier, like looking at the structural inequities. And if someone on city council or someone on city staff does not know what those are, ask someone. Like ask Sandra specifically, like, what were you referring to? Joel, what have you encountered when you've taught children things that maybe their parents didn't want them to learn about different cultures, or just all the diversity that you bring in? Like, ask people about their lived experiences, because if you don't know, you will never dig deep and see those systems that have been set up to continue perpetuating those.
You know, I'm reminded of a very short story. When my daughter was maybe 8, she went to the Berkeley schools, and she went to school where I went to school in the Berkeley Hills. Berkeley had reverse busing, right? So it was actually a pretty diverse school because they brought everybody in. It didn't matter where the neighborhood was. We had a scare. One of my daughter's friends died from meningitis. And, you know, she was an 8-year-old girl. She got sick one day, was dead the next. And it was all over the news. You guys, if you look at, you may remember this in the Berkeley schools, you know, 22 years ago. And they had the cameras there. And the director of public health was addressing the audience. And there were a lot of, there were African-American, it was mixed, but, you know, the African-American, some of the African-Americans parents were raising their hand, what, you know, what should we do? What can we do? And then you had income disparities. So the director of public health said, well, just go talk to your private pediatrician. I blew the blank up because not everybody had I mean, I was lucky I did, but had a private pediatrician, right? It's this whole notion, schools matter. Power structures are embedded in everything, and particularly in our, you know, in our schools. Our babies are our most precious asset. So that is why the schools, I am so pleased to see that, you know, I couldn't influence this, but that you all raised the schools to one of the key pillars, because all of these things, emergencies happen within schools that, as I think Zaira said, highlight disparities and how people are treated. And I just want to finish this story. So I I called my pediatrician. He said, go to Children's Hospital and get the, I guess it was a vaccine or something. And I go, now I'm in a suit, right? I present a certain way. One of my daughter's friends, her mother was there. She was scared to death. She didn't have a pediatrician. You know, she was trying to communicate that she wanted the vaccine. Do you know they wouldn't give it to her? and they wouldn't give it to her because the way she presented versus the way I presented. So what I did was I made sure that she got that vaccine that day. I was not leaving until she got it. But what if I hadn't been there? This is what happened. It can start in the schools. Supremacy goes all the way through. Inequities are all the way through. All of these pillars that you all are talking about are critical. They're absolutely critical. I just applaud you all for raising all of these issues to the fore. And in terms of this whole climate of misogynoir, if you don't know what it is, look it up. It is real. It is real. We are human. We are deserving of the same rights and respect and care as everybody else. And when we don't get it, we make noise now. We're not quiet anymore. And that's what this committee is about. All of you are collectively making noise to make a change in partnership with the city. Do not give this work up. Anybody else have a comment? I think, Julia, do you have you have your hand up?
I do, thank you. And I know that so first I wanted to just say to Superintendent Lowry, I'm so sorry. I applaud you for sharing your heart with us. And I agree with Zaira. It's beyond embarrassing. It's painful as a woman, as a human, to listen to somebody else share that. And I'm so sorry. I also want you guys to know that these stories, they're painful and we are adults, but these same exact things are happening to our children. Like Tracy said, last year, a student, which I will not name, at St. Vincent's, needed to do some service hours. And he is a young man who loves business. He's African American, and he went into 5 stores, retail stores in Petaluma, and was trying to ask them about different procedures that they had because he was kind of just doing some service work around it or wanted to. When he walked in, no one greeted him. They wouldn't speak to him. He's with his mother also, I will say. He is dressed up. But the fact that he walks in and he has dark skin scared people. This is a child. This is a 16-year-old child. So that was, he's 16 now, so he's 15 years old. And when I tell you guys that the businesses that was one of the things I wrote in my homework too, is that the businesses, you can't have people come into your stores and you're trying to sell a product and you won't even give the common courtesy of a hello. I love shopping. When I go into a store and no one will give me the courtesy and no one else is in the store, they're not busy helping someone else. They won't speak to me and say hello. I turn around and I leave. And Tracy, I'm trying to get more outspoken because it's hurtful to not even be acknowledged. And then when we share these stories, and the problem is this story got shared to me by the mother. This happened a year ago. She was so hurt. She didn't want to share it. These stories are happening all the time to our kids of color. And that's, it's so, you should have felt the pain that Superintendent Lowry shared with us. And she's an adult, educated, in a position. This is a 15-year-old child this is happening to. And based on the fact that he cannot get out of his skin and put on a magic cloak and come in so that it makes that store owner feel appropriate or feel safe, this is what happens. And these stories happen all the time. Just last week at homecoming, a friend of mine who's African American said she was just livid. And I was like, I've never seen you like this. You're always really dumb. What is going on? She said, my son asked somebody to go to the homecoming dance. And she said no, because she thinks my son is a thug because he's African American. He's a 4.0. But that doesn't matter. He has an incredible family. But she thinks and she went over and confronted them. And I was like, I'm coming with you. And we went and it was like, oh, you're really nice. You speak English. You speak well. You're wearing the school color. Like, it's so, this work is beyond, it's really, really, really difficult.
Julia, thank you for sharing that. And thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Zaira, and thank you everybody who shared. You know why this Buddha is behind me? Because I have to look at it every day to calm down, okay? To calm down. And there is a maxim that the people who do this work in DEI work operate by. We don't put BIPOC, LGBTQ plus people, whatever, other you want to put out there. We don't put them on the spot to tell these stories because we're sick and tired of telling these stories. We're sick and tired of living this. And it's triggering and it hurts. It hurts and it brings all of this up. So just because we're not walking around telling you these stories, or you may see me visiting some of my dear friends in Petaluma, smiling, doesn't mean we don't carry this with us, okay? It's real. It is real. That is why this committee is so critical. It is so critical. So thank you. Thank you all. Is there anybody else? Zaira, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, because I was emotional back then, but in reality, feeling safe, belonging in Petaluma shouldn't be political, period. But somehow it always is. Also, 2022 is a crucial year for school board. They're running, Petaluma City Schools have 3 seats up. Old Adobe Union has 3 seats up. One thing that you can do and be proactive at is ask every candidate, what are they going to do, not just for DEI, but what are their responses? Are they culturally competent? Are they culturally responsive? Are they culturally aware? That is important to know in your candidate that you are voting for to sit on that school board. It's not just it's representing all of the students. So that's just my end bit. Appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all. Joel?
Just wanted to add, the Watts School District has 5, which is all of our board members. All seats are open for election in 2022. All 5.
All right. Thank you. All right. Well, the rest of this feels a little anticlimactic after all of that. I mean, this conversation is the essence of this committee. Okay, your work output is fabulous, but this is the reason why. There's an exercise that we're not going to do it. I'd love to share it with you to do on your own at some point. It's called the 5 whys. You can actually look it up. But you start with why do you do this, or whatever it is. Why do you work here, or why do you live in Petaluma? And then the next, you go deeper. With each question, you push yourself deeper. And it's a great exercise because you get to the heart of it. And I think even though we didn't do the exercise, we got to the heart of why we're on this committee and why we're doing this work. So thank you all inadvertently for doing the 5 whys there. So what I was going to do next is put up the slide on the last slate, which was the creation of a multicultural center, restorative justice. Do we want to do that? Do we want to look over that? Or do we, other than that, then what we need to do is just walk through what the process will be going forward and then open for public comment. Do you want to go ahead and look through that last slate? You can shake your head, yay, no, yes. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, let's just look through it. Let's put up that last one, please. Okay, so the creation of a multicultural center, restorative justice. Creation of a multicultural center by investing in the Lucchese Center and the Phoenix Theater, Measure U funds for the infrastructure piece, Pandemic Relief Fund to invest in organizations and multicultural events held at the venues. In partnering with all Petaluma public school districts, the Petaluma Multicultural Community Center shall create and promote social awareness, diversity education, and provide support for services for the students of Petaluma. A committee of 7 residents shall be appointed to oversee and evaluate the multicultural aspects of the center and to integrate and expand restorative justice programming. Creation of a multicultural center by investing in the Lucchese Center and the Phoenix Center. I think that's a duplication. Ingrid, I just saw that's the same as number 1. The space should have a physical design that fosters community engagement, constructive collaboration, and effective communication regarding the needs and concerns of all community members. So let's take that down for a minute and let's discuss this in the gallery. This is one of the reasons why this is so important. If this is done right, if this community center, multicultural center is done right, it can be the physical manifestation of this work. I'm not saying it's the pinnacle, it's not the end all and be all, but it can be a safe place where productive conversations are held, where salon sessions are held, where you discuss things in great depth, where people communicate. It can be a place that continues to catalyze change. And it can be a place where businesses come in as well. It can be something that's very inclusive. So are there comments on this topic? Yes, Julia.
Just a comment that I'd like you to say public and private schools, or private and public schools, because then that includes schools that are not public, so that everyone's
okay.
welcome. Thank you.
Okay, Ingrid, did you catch that?
Yes,
Ingrid?
she did.
She got it? Okay, yeah, so it's the one in partnering with all Petaluma public and private schools. Let's just take districts out. Yeah, let's just change that. Okay, thank you. Ramona?
No, actually, that's exactly what I was gonna ask.
Okay.
It should not exclude private schools.
Yeah, you're right. Same thing happens there that happens every place else. Other thoughts on the Multicultural Center and restorative justice? No? No more hands up? Aaron, am I missing anybody?
Lou just raised his hand.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say that I've been reading a lot and learning a lot about racial trauma and healing racial trauma, and not just racial trauma, trauma in general.
Mm-hmm.
And when I, the piece of homework that I submitted that had a big restorative piece in it included something about healing racial trauma, and I just think that that's not something really that's included anywhere in what we've done, and I do think that's an important component in making progress for everyone, is recognizing trauma and healing trauma. So
well, maybe we should.
I'm not making a proposal, but that came up for me, so I thought I'd mention it.
Well, I am. So maybe it should be this, there's the one last bullet. The space should have a physical design that fosters community engagement, constructive collaboration, and effective communication regarding the needs and concerns of all community members. Either we should add it there. It doesn't even have to say physical design. It could just say a design that also focuses on healing racial trauma. Because I think it's important to call that out. What does the group think? Should it just be racial, or should it be, because LGBTQ++ have a huge amount of trauma that they deal with. I don't know if you all are familiar with Billy Porter, but I heard an interview, I think he dresses better than anybody on this planet. Anyway, he was on NPR this morning, and he was talking about his new book and, the trauma that he went through growing up, as a young gay, child, and one who liked to dress and, blah, blah, blah. I mean, should we put something in there that looks at healing all trauma based, discrimination based trauma? I don't know the words there. How
about just all trauma?
No, I think it needs to be specific to trauma that's induced because you're somehow other. You're made to be labeled as other. I'm looking for the group here for that.
I'm fine with adding that. The only reason, with racial trauma is because I think of it as intersectional. You can be Black and gay, you can be Latinx and gay. So, but I hear what you're saying, and I think if you want to add that in, I'm for that.
Okay, Pedro,
you may want to just highlight historically excluded and marginalized communities as a way to to reduce trauma for those communities.
Say that again. Historically excluded and marginalized
communities.
Ingrid, did you get that? Ingrid the magician. She's gonna send me a text. I know it, but she's good. Okay, so historically,
I think I got it.
Okay,
So
historically excluded and
on healing trauma associated with, or trauma of historically excluded and something
and marginalized
communities.
Okay, perfect.
I just wanted to make one other point. I think at a time when I think it's a little curious that at a time when it's so where physical environment is so challenging, right, with COVID, that we're looking at a space, physical space. I think a virtual space might be, or it doesn't have to be a physical space, right? It can be. I think the programming is much more important than the location sometimes. Although I do understand the significance of having a physical space in Petaluma. So, but
no, that's a really good point.
So I just, that's something that just crossed my mind, especially with the COVID pandemic and other issues that are arising.
Well, yeah, because we may never get out of this. I'm sorry to be Cassandra crying doom, but anyway. Okay, so Ingrid, on that last one where it says the space, we should put virtual and physical.
Got it.
In parentheses. And then where it says have a physical, no, just a design. Take the word physical out. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Anything else on that?
I just want to add one quick thing. I volunteer with KQED a lot, and they're actually doing that same exact thing. So they have opened up a space with a lot of social distancing, but they're also providing whatever show that they're doing live on Mariposa Street in San Francisco. Virtual is an option also. And then to Lou, thank you for doing the work. It's so much work. And I just finished reading a book called Black is the Body. And it's incredibly well written. So just share that because I don't know how to give that out to you guys after tonight. So thank you. And there's a lot of great resources also on KQED as far as reading about all sorts of great authors there. But Black is the Body is an incredible book.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Well, thank you all. So it's 8:20 and let me give me a second here. Let's go to the next. Let's pull the slide deck up and let's pull up next steps, please. Unless anybody has any more comments. Any more hands up? Nope. Okay. All right. All right. So the next steps are that I am finishing up my summary of our work. Okay. It's literally, summary and some, when I say guidance for, for the city, of course, this will become, once it's final, it'll become public record, but I'm not making recommendations. You all are making the recommendations. What I'm doing is guidance, and pitfalls to watch out for, based on, my years of doing this work and doing organizational behavior and organization change work, and really giving the council, an overview and a sort of a directional narrative of what we did, but your work is the work product. Okay, I want to go over that. So I'll present, once it's final, the final summary to the city council. Of course, once it's final, it becomes public record, and we'll figure out the next steps, and there will be council workshops to discuss priorities and timeline, meaning to discuss the work that you all did. And the council can then, and this obviously will all be open. And then the city and community will continue to work and report progress on the plan as things move forward. So it's an ongoing process. And even though the committee won't be meeting anymore, the council and the city will be very active in moving this work forward. And you all are, the experts, right? That can continue to chime in and be a part of these things. All right. So I think, yes.
We do have Peggy with her hand raised.
Peggy, go ahead, please.
Tracy, I just wanted to reiterate, we had talked about doing the final summary to the council in mid-December. I think it was December 13th.
Yes. I didn't want to put that date out there in case it changed. Then I'd get a text. So, okay. Yeah, we're looking at having that ready by December and presenting it on December 13th. So you might want to put that date in your book or wherever you put them on your laptop, your phone. All right. Thank you, Peggy. Peggy, do you want to add any more comments?
Just a big thanks to the committee, and I'm really looking forward to bringing this to council, and we'll keep everybody posted and as far as time. But I want to thank everybody for their time and their thought and for sharing. And it is going to make a better city, and for your work, Tracy. So really appreciate you.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, my honor. Thank you. Well, I want to, before we go to public comment, I just want to leave you with, we can go back to gallery if you'd like. I'd like to just leave you with 4 words. One is tenacity. Oh, Faith, yes, go ahead. You're muted.
I forget about that.
Okay.
In the comments that you just put up there, it said final summary. I want to make sure I understand what's going to go to the city council. It's going to be all of our homework and then all of the recommendations that we made. Is it
right?
Is it going to be a summary of what we those final things that we decided on, or will it be all of it then with the summary? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think I do. So the way I envision it, right, is that I look at this, okay, as an executive, and they're all executives, right? The council are executive. They're not going to read
exactly
3,000 pages. They don't have time. So what I'm doing is essentially think of it as an executive summary. Okay. But I hope you all know that the way I will write it is what you've given us. You know, we have the work, the slate that has been agreed upon and massaged and tweaked. And then there will also be, these are not my recommendations for which ones the council should focus on. It's about how you go about doing this work in a way that's inclusive. And here are the pitfalls that you need to be aware of, okay? But all of your homework will be in an appendix, in a PDF file. They will see everything. And in my summary that I'm writing, it says, please take the time to read through the homework. And we all know as adults how to read through things. So you get the color that way. You get the emotion. You get the details that I can put it all in the matrix, but that's going to lose it. People don't respond. They don't. The part of the neocortex. People make decisions based upon the limbic system of the brain that the why that attaches to the emotion. Okay, that's what your homework gives them. That's what these stories that you just told gives them. It's the reason for the change. What I'm doing is just laying out the process we went through. Okay, your words will be there for those of you who submitted homework, and I guarantee you, I think almost all the council members watch these sessions. You may not know it, but they do. So, anybody else want to say anything before I summarize my 4 words? Anybody else? Aaron, do you see any other hands?
No other hands raised.
Okay, so the 4 words are tenacity, and I'm going to look at my notes because I don't want to forget any of these. Never let go. Never let go of your fight to be better. Never let go of that. The next one is perspective. The way you grow as a human being and the way we grow as an organization, in organizations or in a society, is to view things from different perspectives. There is a notion that came up in management theory years ago. It came from the shop floor. And it was this notion of get up on the balcony. And what that means is, as an executive, as an observer, as a participant, you can't understand what's happening in the whole system unless you can find a vantage point where you can view things holistically, not just from your perspective. And I challenge you, look at your own biases. Look at your own privilege, okay? That's part of getting on that balcony and getting out of yourself and looking at the whole thing. That's perspective. So tenacity, perspective, empathy. Try to comprehend what someone else is feeling. You can't walk in their shoes, but you can at least listen without judgment. Listen with your heart and not with your head. Because once again, that why we change comes from the limbic system, which is the emotional, not the neocortex, not the thinking part of the brain. It comes from here. And finally, hope. You got to hold on to hope for a better tomorrow, and all of you can make it so. Thank you. So let's go to public comment.
Thank you, Tracy. Those wishing to participate in public comment must raise their virtual hand and wait to be called on by the moderator. Speakers are reminded to be respectful in their comments. Threats of violence and obscenity are grounds for removal from this meeting. A countdown will appear for the convenience of the speaker and viewers. Your microphone will be muted at the end of that countdown. The first speaker will be acknowledged and invited to speak when the countdown begins. Please make sure to unmute yourself when you're invited to do so. First speaker that we have is Sheila Baker, followed by John Hanania. Sheila, I will now allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and begin.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. This is kind of coming way out from left field, so forgive me if it doesn't quite fit in. I'm actually interested in active transportation. I myself don't own a car. And we have in active transportation, okay, so there's bus riding, which would be Petaluma Transit and Sonoma County Transit. Walking and biking, attitudes that are really and cultural biases that go back to the 20th century. And they're really amazingly awful, okay, instead of being really respectful and in awe of people who use public transit and who bike to work and bike to school and bike to services and walk to school. We look at those people as being others and less than human or something, I guess. So people of color who walk can be considered targets. People who use buses can be seen as, oh man, those are losers. Oh my goodness, look at those losers. They're just riding the bus. A lot of people of color ride the bus. But maybe more people if they felt that they had the respect of all humans for riding the bus. And also biking. Of our two ghost bikes, Brian Casey's is still up, and that's on Corona. And say his name, Valerio Estrada. His ghost bike has been taken down twice in front of the place where he was killed, In-N-Out Burger on Lakeville. And I just want to say that I feel that active transportation can not only lift you up and allow you to survive, but you can thrive with it if we had really, really good routes and awesomely safe streets. And because gasoline is now $5 a gallon, and I mean, it's just car expenses are outrageous. And so to exchange the keys to the car to the keys of the house and really thrive in your home because you can afford rent is really a goal. So I'm for everyone doing well with bus riding, walking, and biking. Thank you very much.
Next speaker that we have is John Hanania, followed by Sarah. John, I will now allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and begin.
Good evening. First of all, thank you very much for the committee members. And I'm really sorry about the superintendent and Zaira. I deal with that every single day. Since my background, I'm from the Middle East and I'm very dark skinned. But one of the things I'm really disappointed with, you guys talked about hiring, but I didn't hear anybody talking about firing bad cop, which is we have a few bad cops in Petaluma, and Ken Savano seemed to promote them. He just promoted one person who shouldn't be wearing a uniform, just like he promoted the former cop who was facing charges. And, you know, when you talk about white supremacy, well, there's white supremacy not just in public. There's white supremacy at the elected official, the city administration, the city hall. There's people at the police department. How can you trust to deal with the police when they lie? And I'm talking, I know Brian is watching and Ken Savano is watching. When I asked Brian right to his face about the former cop, if he's still on duty, this is after he was on administrative leave. He told me right to my face, this is not an email, this is not on the phone, right to my face. Yes, he's still on active duty. They didn't tell the public for 15 months after he was on administrative leave. And now he's getting paid taxpayers' money after he assaulted a Black woman. Okay, so I think what some of the process need to happen, you need to figure out how you can get rid of a cop. Other thing that I don't know if you're aware of, Petaluma cannot hire decent people. They have the most bonus out there for lateral move, and I believe it was $25,000, and they cannot get anybody. So what's Ken doing? Promoting Tom, Dick, and Harry. Okay, there's good people in the department, but also there's a bad people. Okay, Ken also practice being very sneaky, and he knows exactly what I'm talking about. If you ask him about the street light pole camera, if you ask him about the envelope, the vanilla envelope, he is very sneaky person, but he also have a good quality about him. Okay, so you need to be able to work with the community, and you need to be able to trust. We asked to meet with him and talk about some of the stuff. We never heard back, myself and other people in the community, but he have no problem putting the publicity stunt with uncomfortable meeting with a Black person. So he can talk with people who don't know anything about the city, but he will not meet with people who knows the city.
Time has expired. The next speaker that we have is Sarah, followed by Petaluma Civics. Sarah, I will now allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and begin.
Hey, good evening, everyone. And thank you for doing all of this. I want to, first off, you are all the bravest people I know right now. Putting yourself in this room to be able to do this work is so vital to the health and safety of our families, of our students, of everyone in this community. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart and all that is me for the work that you do. I especially want to thank Superintendent Sonja Lowry for her bravery and the work that she continues to do in the situation that she's in. To Zaira, to Kenyatta, to Joanna, to Joel, to every single person who has shared experiences on here for the betterment of our community. Being brave for our community is something that you all have to do on a daily basis. And I see you, I hear you, I honor you, and I thank you. And I'm here to support. In regards to hiring diverse leaders, it's not just hiring, as you all have said, you're amazing at speaking this. It is supporting the diverse leadership that gets hired or elected to work and lead in communities and systems that are literally created to oppress them and walk along the glass that is broken from them breaking those glass ceilings. We need to have social emotional support. We need to have trainings for students to come through so that it can become sustainable, so that we do not continue to chase people out of this city and this county consistently, which is happening today in Petaluma, is happening in Sonoma County, is happening all over the place. In regards to being able to have a position that can straddle between the city and education and medical and public services, and there is a position in San Francisco called the Senior Education Advisor, or the Deputy Chief of Staff in Education and Equity. That person has direct connection and works with everyday Parks and Recs, libraries, and education. If we could continue that and have someone in the city council whose job it is to educate themselves, to be involved with the schools, to be involved, so that we can continue to be a web that is connected, working all towards this goal of being a more inclusive and connected and honored community. I want to take another moment to thank you all again. Muchísimas gracias a todos que no se pueden escuchar, que está en español, que está en inglés, que no entienden, que hace falta que todas estas cosas sean bilingües. Los quiero mucho, los honro mucho y espero que tenemos un lugar en el futuro que podemos tener todos. Gracias.
Next speaker that we have is Petaluma Civics, followed by Susan Kirks. Petaluma Civics, I'll now allow you to speak. You're going to mute yourself and begin.
Good evening. Sorry, this is Josh Simmons speaking. I wanted to thank everyone for their participation in this, especially the committee members, for their labor, their vulnerability, and their service. I'm excited to see the resounding support for independent oversight of the police coming out of this committee, and I hope that we will see City Council and City staff receive and make it so. It's worth remembering that this committee's sense of priorities are not an anomaly. 65% of Sonoma County residents voted in favor of independent oversight of the police. I'm a little concerned about the tepid reception by Chief Savano in light of what sounds like a sense of exceptionalism about Petaluma Police Department's track record. But independent oversight isn't just for problem departments. It's for any authentically democratic institution. So PPD's performance isn't relevant to whether we have independent oversight or not. And even if it was relevant, and even if PPD is better than average, PPD does not exist in a vacuum and is not immune to the problematic people, process, and culture. I hope Chief Savano and PPD comes to see this for the opportunity that it is and embraces this enthusiastically. Again, thank you all. Now let's see some action out of this good work.
The next speaker that we have is Susan Kirks. Susan, I'll now allow you to speak. You can mute yourself and begin.
Thank you. Good evening, committee members. I wanted to say I appreciate the opportunity of being able to attend your meetings, and I particularly appreciate being in the space tonight with great respect to hear your comments and the support that you're giving to each other. I would like to also mention the civilian oversight of the Petaluma Police Department. I'm really glad that you have established this as a priority. It is needed in our community in Petaluma, and I would encourage you to continue to press for that priority, and also to be sure that those who are appointed to the committee, once the City Council approves it, are people who have experience with our police here in Petaluma. And I know that Mr. Hanania made some very good points in his comments earlier. He is a person who is very experienced with over 30 years of experience here in Petaluma with the Petaluma Police Department. And he readily acknowledges that there are some very good police, and then there are some policies and other issues that truly, truly need civilian oversight. So I agree that that is a really important priority, and appreciate that you have made that so in your committee's work. I'd also like to ask you to continue to focus on the ARPA funds, remodeling the City Hall, the $650,000 that was mentioned. I believe that our City Council could clearly revisit the staff recommendations that were put into the budget and give a much higher priority to helping to fund and establish your work, the work that you have done, the priorities that you are bringing forward. And I truly hope that our elected officials, I personally feel that we have 2 City Council members who are showing authenticity, who are showing sincerity, and who will prioritize your work. I don't know about the other elected officials, but I personally know that you can probably recognize when you see authenticity and when you do not. And lastly, I'd like to say, please keep your work together and close to your heart, and know that the system you are in, including the city government, the city administration, other parts of our city, are all permeated with the white supremacy and the unconsciousness that you have identified and are talking about. So thank you again for letting me be part of your process as a member of the audience. Thank you.
And Tracy, at this point, that is the last speaker.
Okay. I want to thank all of you for this hard work, for your commitment, and for your really unwavering drive to see this through to the end. It's been a long process. You've produced some amazing work, and I salute you and thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. I really want to see this work. I really want to see this effort. I really want to see your hearts be implemented, your heart's desires be implemented by the city and by all of you. Continuing to push the city, to continuing to partner with the city, continuing to question the city, question each other. You can do this. Petaluma will be changed. Petaluma will be a better place. Thank you. And it's all because of your work. Thank you. Good night.
Record.